Hey everyone. Today, Rita and I are talking about hair, specifically hair thinning and hair loss, and the Ayurvedic perspective on why it may be happening. Often, what we see on the outside of the body is really a reflection of what's going on inside. So, we're going to get into the constitutional piece, why some of us are more prone to hair thinning or hair loss, and then we'll talk about the imbalances that can contribute. Things like excess heat and dryness, hormonal shifts, chronic stress, and even what's happening at the level of your bone tissue. We'll also get into foods, herbs, topical practices, and some simple daily habits that can really make a big difference. So whether this is something you're actively experiencing or you want to understand it better, we think this conversation is going to be really helpful. Thanks so much for being here. We hope you enjoy today's episode.
Welcome to the Ayurveda for Women's Health podcast, where we simplify ancient Ayurvedic wisdom into practical guidance for everyday life. Between the overwhelming wellness trends, quick fixes, and conflicting health advice out there, we return to a science that has been around for thousands of years. I'm Rita, an Ayurvedic health counselor.
And I'm Brittni, an Ayurveda practitioner. In a world that disconnects us from our bodies, we are here to guide you back. Through body literacy, practical tools, and time-tested science, we will help you step boldly into a more empowered, aligned version of yourself. So let's dive in. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Views expressed do not represent our employers.
So, Brittni, we're in another heat wave here this week. How's that been going for you?
It's a great question. So I actually just got back from Colorado. So I was kind of dealing with a different type of heat wave out there. Yeah, it's been interesting kind of managing the heat, both from like when I left prior to Colorado to then managing it in Colorado, because it's going from this very humidity heavy, moisture heavy New England to very dry and arid and windy Colorado. And there's also a lot of wildfires happening. So it's just like very dry and smoky. And so, yeah, kind of like two opposite ends of the heat spectrum, which is interesting to think about from the Ayurvedic perspective. But for me personally, I'd say I've been managing the heat with a lot of patience has been kind of the theme, especially with travel. Easier when I'm home, but while traveling, it felt like it took a lot of like patience to manage the heat because, along with travel, it was everything else that's included in that, right? Eating foods that are not my norm and visiting with friends and like having a lot of other things going on that felt challenging to manage in the summer, in the heat time, especially when, you're coordinating with other people and meals and all of, that whole side of it. So I feel that patience has been the theme for me, or attempted patience has been the theme for me the last couple of weeks. So yeah, how has the heat been feeling for you?
Yeah, it's not been as bad. I will have days that I complain and then I'll talk to my clients who are further south and it's like 15, 20 degrees hotter there. So it reminds me to be appreciative that it is still cooler up here in northern Vermont, but it's definitely been hot. And I'd say the one thing that I feel is keeping my pitta in check is just swimming, finding rivers and swimming holes, and not even swimming. Like we'll go there, dip our bodies in, get in the car and go home. Just that initial cool off, I feel is going a long way. And it's something that I didn't do as much the last couple summers and am really committing to. We have like our Tuesday night swims and on weekends we're trying to get out there too. And yeah, it's felt really good.
Yeah, I think water is so important for pittas, especially that temperature, from the temperature perspective of keeping things cool. And yeah, we had gone to the hot springs in Colorado. So really dry year. So usually when I go to Colorado, we will do some stuff on the water, like go boating or rafting or get on the paddleboard. But this year the water was so low, we really didn't get into the water that much to that extent. But we did go to the hot springs one day, and I was with a couple of friends who wanted to go. And I love going to the hot springs. I think it's so nice to be in mineral rich water and be submerged in that and really connect with the earth, the water element in that way, like earth and water. So I love going to the hot springs. On this trip, I really was being mindful about how heated I was feeling. And so when we went, I went in the pool. There it was lower than body temperature. It was 87 degrees. So it's not cold, right? It certainly wasn't a cold plunge by any means, but it was cooler than my body temperature. And it was exactly what I needed to actually cool myself down. And I think being submerged in water also feels really grounding for pittas. I think it helps, for me at least, it helps me feel kind of stable in some way, right? I think it's like the heaviness of the water kind of helps ground that mobility that I feel often, that makes me kind of feel like airy and light. And I think, yeah, being in like a pool of water also helps me relax my mind. It feels that there's less of that sharpness and that intensity, and you kind of melt into the water and like become one with the water. And I think that's so important for pitta constitutions. And it's something that I personally love and feel drawn to water in that way of wanting to be submerged and can move more freely and more easily without like a cold plunge, right? You're like in and out, in and out. And especially in Colorado, if you go up to like the alpine lakes, can be like really, really cold. So I think finding that like right temperature that feels you can relax into the water, I've found to be really helpful, especially when I'm feeling overheated.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when you were talking about it being pitta balancing, I think that there's some level of playfulness when we're talking about being in the water and swimming. It like brings us back a little bit. And especially we've been going to this one swimming hole that has a waterfall, and you can actually climb up the rocks and slide down the waterfall like a slide, and it's just feels so playful. And I think that's maybe also a big part of why it's felt so balancing for pitta.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, for sure. Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, now that I'm home, I am restabilizing, cooling down with aloe and pomegranate juice. Yeah, what do you have there? I know you
I was
have
good.
something.
Yeah. This is the same color. This is
Yeah.
hibiscus, linden, and coriander. This has
Oh, okay.
been my
Yeah.
go-to infusion, and I'm obsessed with it. I've been drinking it every day. I've been sending it to my clients. Bryce loves it too. It's,
Mm.
yeah, it's like I've been doing it as a cool infusion,
Mm.
and it's just feeling really refreshing in the afternoon when it's pitta time. Pitta's like building up a little bit. You can feel that heat at like 1, 2 o'clock. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Okay. So I tried hibiscus for the first time a few weeks ago,
Oh, okay.
and I have some thoughts.
Okay.
So I wanted to like really try it alone and
hmm
see what it tasted like. So I know it's a very drying herb, or can be
hmm
very drying. And I think it was a little too drying for me.
Mm.
So to have it alone, so I think hibiscus for me, I think would be helpful like having it with another kind of juicy herb and one that has more moisture in it. I'm curious if you've played around with that at all, but I think I actually got a little constipated after having
Wow.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, which kind of surprised me. Like I know it's dry, but I'm in the middle of summer. It was super humid when I was having it. And maybe there were other factors involved. Like I had a big run the day before, so I had saved it for after the run to kind of clear out some of that heat that accumulates during a long day outside. But I think it may have just been a little too drying for me, that if I had combined it with another kind of juicier herb, I'm curious if that would have just felt a little more balancing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will say my body does really well with some astringency and the more astringent herbs, but that's part of why I've been adding the linden. Linden does add a little bit of that, like, not as, I wouldn't say it's as much mucilage as say like marshmallow root, but I do feel like it has that um that factor. And you can even like see the difference in the tea, in that it will almost get like slightly thicker with the linden addition. So that would be a nice addition. Or I think you could do a little bit of marshmallow root
Mm,
in there as well. And
mm.
I'm trying to think of what else would go well with that, because it's like the taste of hibiscus is so good. You want to keep
Yeah.
that, right?
Well, and that's what I wanted to try. I was like, I really just want to know like what this tastes like as on
Yeah,
its own, and it tasted delicious. I'm curious, maybe like oat straw.
sure.
Does that have more of a like unctuousness to it? Because I know that's really good for the nervous system. So I
Mm-hmm.
think, okay, if it's good for the nervous system, it's probably going to be a little thicker and
Yeah.
juicier. So maybe I could try that as a combination.
Yeah. Yeah. Oat straw, milky oats. Those are two that I
Mm,
add a lot. The milky oats is always a nice little calcium boost too. And oat straw, both of them I think of as mineral boosting. So
cool.
yeah. Yeah, that
Okay.
sounds yummy
Yeah. Well, I'll give that a try. It's always fun to play around with herbs and try them at different
for sure.
times.
Well, and speaking of playing with herbs, I was in this course the other day and I just learned that wild strawberry leaf. Have you ever worked
Mm.
with that?
Mm-mm, I haven't.
So I was learning about it as being a uterine tonic and being astringent, kind of similar to red raspberry leaf. But I have so many wild strawberries. They've
Cool.
gone past now, but so many on our land. And so, yeah, I went out today and harvested a bunch of the leaves, and I'm excited to try that as an infusion as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, keep us posted on what it tastes like and
Yeah.
what you notice. That's so
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Well, we have the raspberries here. So this year I started harvesting the red raspberry leaves for my teas, for my uterine tonic teas. But I love that you can just get it right from your back door, from the
Yeah.
backyard.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's what I think is so. I feel like herbalism is just something that I can and will study for the rest of my life and always be learning so many things. But I think when we come into herbalism from an Ayurvedic background, and so many of the herbs are herbs that originate in India and are these like beautiful, powerful herbs that you can really connect with. But I think it's I think it's so powerful to look at like, what's growing in your yard, what's growing in the woods that you're, walking through, that kind of thing. Because there's so much medicine all around us. Yeah, it's just fascinating to like just again be like, oh, I've been walking by this every day. It's a uterine tonic. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. Yeah, and I think that Ayurveda gives us such a nice framework to work with herbs, even if they are more Western herbs or grow naturally where you are. I think that, yeah, looking at qualities and the principles of Ayurveda, I think it helps us understand how they could support the body as you get to know different herbs that are growing wherever you are. Because I think that's the beauty of being in different climates and in different environments around the world, is that there's always going to be something in abundance, right? And like, what is it offering for you?
yeah.
So this year we have, actually last couple years, we've had a ton of milkweed. And so we have so many monarchs, which is amazing. But I have yet to find, I need to do a little research and see what it could be used for, because I'm not sure. So I don't know if you have come across that at all yet.
Not that I've ever looked into how to work with milkweed or what its properties are. I haven't. I've definitely had it grow in my garden before, but yeah, no. I know, because all of these plants that we've been taught for years are like, oh, pull this weed. And there are, of course, these really we think of as invasive plants and how they can impact, especially when they're not native to the areas that we're in. But yeah, you know me, I'm always like ranting about dandelion and
Yeah.
how how we've been taught to
Yeah.
spray and pull and remove them, and they're like just the most medicinal, powerful
Yeah.
plant. So yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. Well, keep me posted if you
I will.
learn about milkweed. Yeah.
I will. Yeah. Yeah.
I know I could rant about herbs forever, but I guess we should pivot. Well, I do think our conversation that we've had so far feels relevant in terms of it being Pitta season. Do you want to tell us, Brittany, a little bit about what we're talking about today?
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about hair thinning and hair loss, and from the Ayurvedic perspective. So this is something that I could share some like personal observations with myself, people who've seen, like within my family, and then also clients that I've worked with. So I feel like it is a relevant topic for many people. And I think it also ties into we see very often in the wellness culture of wanting to have like thick, lustrous hair. And I think that Ayurveda really highlights individuality. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. So, yes, we can understand hair loss and hair thinning from an imbalance perspective, and we can understand it from a constitution perspective. So we'll get into more details about both of those, and then also ways that you can balance it or help support so that your body is less prone to having that thinning or that loss. So we'll dive into why it might be happening, what the considerations are for your constitution, and then ways to support it throughout your life or different phases of life.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this because, well, one, I think it's very common. I've actually had a lot of women in my practice, a lot of women who are maybe transitioning into this perimenopause, moving closer to menopause phase, that they're starting to notice some hair thinning, hair fall. And it's really distressing, right? Like it can feel really alarming and feel scary. And so I think the Ayurvedic framework can be really helpful in helping us understand, like you're saying, why this is happening. And yes, there can be these genetic and constitutional factors that can contribute to how our hair is for sure. And then there's also, like you're saying, these imbalanced factors. And when essentially the tissues that nourish our hair, if they're not getting the certain right nutrients, if they're not able to assimilate those nutrients, that is one of the main things that we can see. So yeah, it's an inside job when we're talking about hair thinning and hair fall. And I'm excited to talk about it. I did want to ask you too, before we jump in, do you have any experience with hair fall or hair thinning? Is that something you've ever struggled with?
Not specifically. I've never, had the experience that like I've noticed hair falling out significantly because of my constitution. Do have thinner, finer hair, but not to a point where it's felt like an imbalance.
Mm.
Yeah, I can't think of any. My husband, though, has thinning bald hair, and so that's something that we've talked about. I'd say that's like the most significant in our immediate family.
Yeah.
But yeah, not anything that I've personally experienced from an imbalance perspective. How about you?
I mean, not really in the sense that, like, we talk in Ayurveda often about this idea of weak spots, kavya gunas, like these areas that people can be more prone to experience illness or imbalance, kind of where disease will cluster. I've often thought of my hair as kind of my lucky spot. Not that that's an actual Ayurvedic term, but I've always had a lot of hair and it's always been really thick and really long. And there was one period in my life where I was in a lot of transition, a lot of stress, just had a lot going on. And I remember I was in the grocery store and I was in the self-checkout and there's one of those cameras that you can see the top of your head. And I saw that I had a spot that I was losing hair at the very top of my head. And it was, I'm like 5'9", so it's not that many people can see the top of my head, but it was very apparent and it was very distressing. And I remember just having, like, really going down the rabbit hole of like products and what I could do for it and all of those factors. And it then kind of came back to the roots of Ayurveda and understanding like the impact of stress that we'll talk about. And it did remediate itself fairly quickly. I feel like it was a little bit of a wake up call for me, so to speak, where I think I was in that period of stress where I was kind of just like, well, this is what it is right now. It'll get better when X, Y, and Z falls in place. And it was one of those moments where I was like, oh no, I need to make some changes here because hair fall is scary. It's distressing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because it's like alarming to see. And I think it's something that I think it can be often overlooked, the connection to what's going on inside, right? And I think we see it as this very like external visual representation or experience, but it is that connection to like you said, it's an inside job, right? This is our body showing what's going on the inside. And I think that we'll go through all of it, like why that's the case. But I think it's really helpful to kind of bridge that gap there, like bring those two pieces together, because it's not just what we're doing topically. It's not just what we're putting on to, cover up or to address or to strengthen, whatever it is, to that area of the hair follicle, but it's telling us what's going on inside the body from that specific tissue. And so I understand why it feels alarming, because it's on the outside of us, right? It's this like representation of us. And that can feel very scary when you don't understand why. But hopefully this conversation bridges some of that gap of these other areas we can look at that are not just like buying another product.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Cause we'll talk about like there are some things we can do topically, but it's always going to require more than that for sure. For sure. Yeah. Well, maybe let's circle back to what you mentioned in terms of constitutional differences, because I do think, I think back to one of our early episodes, Built Differently by Design, and how we talked about this idea that your constitution can dictate so much about yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, these different things that we're prone to. And hair is definitely one of those examples. And we can see these major differences in hair with different constitutions, where kaphas tend to be more prone to thicker hair, having a lot of it, this kind of lustrous, wavy hair, whereas pitta constitutions can be more prone to having finer hair, that like finer strand of hair, where I think a lot of pittas, myself included, are always looking for more volume in their hair. I have a lot of it, but the strands are fine. And then vatas are more prone to drier hair, and maybe like a little bit more curly, frizzy, but definitely that drier, even more prone to brittle hair as compared to the other constitutions. I feel like I might have missed some qualities in there. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say with more of like a kapha type hair, we're always also seeing that earth and water quality as having like that shine and that almost oiliness to it, right? There can be that thickness in that way. So it's kind of, I feel like you like put your hair in a ponytail, can you get like how much of your fingers can you get around it? Or is it like really hard to like get your whole hand around your hair? So that can be that, that spectrum of really thick to really fine. And just because you have thick hair doesn't necessarily mean you're a kapha constitution. We all have all of the elements in it. I think it can be helpful in just understanding, like, this is the type of hair that I have. So you could be a pitta constitution, but maybe have a little thicker hair. That earth quality may just be showing up in that area of the body. But I would think about it in terms of growth. So if there's kapha, there's going to be more of those growth qualities. So your hair might grow very fast, right? Growth won't be an issue. It's going to like happen very quickly and very steadily and with a lot of robustness to it. Whereas the opposite side of vata and even slightly pitta, because there's that thinness and the fineness too. So those lighter constitutions, those lighter qualities, that is where there's just going to be less growth there, right? Because earth is what gives us that growth, and earth does not exist within pitta and vata. So if you have something with a more predominant air or fire quality, there's going to be a lightness to that will be reflected in the thickness or the growth quality of the hair itself.
Yeah, that's a really good distinction. And I'm glad that you also pointed out that there are all these variations within different constitutions. It's this interesting puzzle that of just where the different doshas can accumulate in the body and how that can lead to, again, like what we're prone to on all levels.
Right. And this is what also reflects the individuality of understanding what we're talking about, where your hair is different from the next person, right? Like Rita has different hair than me, even though we're both pitta constitutions. So our hair care is going to be different. And the other thing I wanted to share too, I was just talking to a client this morning about it, and we were talking about hair care products. So I told her to listen to this episode after we were done. But if you're someone that's like, oh, I have really oily hair, I would also consider the type of products you're using on your hair, because if our products are stripping our hair of natural oils, our body's going to overcompensate by creating more oil. So I think being mindful of products that we're using and how that might be creating a different imbalance than like a natural imbalance, so to speak.
Sure.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense, or does that create confusion?
No, it makes sense. I think we're like always thinking about what's going on internally and then what are we doing topically anytime we're talking about anything in the body. So, yeah, I think that definitely applies for hair. And with that, if you have certain qualities of your hair that have been true your whole life, if your hair has been more fine or dry or brittle kind of naturally in relation to your constitution, then I do think that you are someone who's more at risk for experiencing hair thinning and hair fall and hair loss and possibly early graying and those factors too. So, yeah, there's like this genetic component. And again, also this level of just what you're prone to if certain qualities get increased in your body from diet, from lifestyle, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll go into when we're thinking about hair loss, Vata and Pitta are involved. If we're thinking about those doshas, we're thinking about fire and wind. And if they are in excess, that is what is contributing to either the thinning or the loss of hair. And so with Pitta, we're thinking about it that hair follicle is actually being burned by excess heat. And so that burning is that excess fire in the body, which is also moving upward because fire and heat move upward. And that's where we can experience it on the top of the head very often. That is where the follicle itself is being damaged. And that is impacting the growth of that hair. And then from the role of Vata, we're thinking about excess wind. Well, wind will also move upward in the body. And so now we have this wind that is creating dryness and poor circulation to the scalp. It's going to push that fire up even farther and contribute to the fire itself. So we want to find this steadiness and balance, and we're soothing Pitta and Vata, we're soothing air, and we're soothing fire.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we're kind of going to explain this from a few different lenses, right? So I think you beautifully explained that from the doshic lens and thinking about it in that way. The other thing that we're thinking about when we're noticing this change in hair, this hair thinning, this hair fall, is looking at a tissue level. And so we've talked a bit on here before about how in Ayurvedic physiology, there's these 7 layers of tissue. And the layer of tissue that's connected to the hair is actually the bone, which is interesting because I don't know that we think about it that way in the Western world, but hair is considered this byproduct, this secondary tissue of the bone, along with our teeth and our nails. And so when we're seeing this depletion of hair, it's really indicative that there's this depletion of bone tissue. And so we have to look and think about, well, each of those different 7 layers of tissue require different nutrients. And when we're thinking about the bone layer, the bone requires minerals. And that's what strengthens and hardens the bone is minerals, thinking about things like zinc and magnesium and silica and calcium. And so it's really this question of, one, are we getting enough mineral dense foods in our diet? I think what I see more than that is oftentimes people are eating those foods, but there's a breakdown in digestion or something going on with the nervous system where there's an issue with assimilation of those foods. So we'll definitely talk about what I think of as like the key foods for bone health and therefore hair health. But I think there's also that level of, it's not just about eating those foods. It's about that whole body picture of how the nutrients are getting assimilated and delivered to the bone tissue.
Yeah, for sure. And this is why, again, Ayurveda comes back to digestion as the first area that we address because you might be taking in all the right things, quote, right things, right? But is it actually getting to these tissues that are needing all of these nutrients and minerals like you're describing? And so, I mean, hopefully that in itself helps to clarify that connection between what's happening on the outside of my body related to what's happening on the inside and how these tissues are being developed. Because with every tissue, there's a byproduct of that tissue. Our nails, our hair, our teeth, our skin, all of these are byproducts of the internal tissues. And it's this way of the body is moving out what it no longer needs, which is also so fascinating to me that like what we eat becomes our bones. And then when our bones continue to regenerate cells and move cells out, well, those cells moving out become our hair and become our nails. And like that in itself is just so profound in intelligence of that the body is doing this without us thinking about it, right? It's just, this is what it does. This is its rhythm. This is its system. And we're just over here living life, right? Like, so yeah, I think just calling that out really kind of gets me excited because I think it is such a fascinating reminder of how intelligent this self-healing system is, where the body is taking it what it needs, applying it to us on a cellular level, and then moving out the rest through this like very timely rhythm process.
Yeah.
We don't have to do anything. It's happening, right?
Yeah.
So it fascinates me every time we start talking about it. And I just like to share that.
No, I'm with you. I find Ayurvedic physiology so fascinating because I think as you're describing it, it really simplifies things. I mean, there's so much depth to it. But when we think about those 7 layers of tissue and how our nutrition is assimilated into each one, and each layer is taking the nutrition that it needs. And this nutritive juice we think of is visiting each of these tissues, so to speak, and delivering the nutrition that it needs. Like it's so fascinating, and it makes us really pause and think about how important nutrition is and why so much of Ayurveda is focused around digestion and nutrition. It's like that, like we are what we digest. Like all aspects of us are what we're digesting. It's like what we're consuming and then how our body can work with it. It's so fascinating. It's so fascinating. And, you know, I think going back to those layers of tissue as well. So maybe just to name them briefly. So the first layer, rasa, is we can think of as our lymph, our plasma. Then our second is our blood. I always have to like do it in Sanskrit in my
Me
head.
too. I do the same thing.
Yeah. So our lymph and plasma is the first. Our blood's the second. Our muscle is third. Then fat, bone, nervous system tissue, and reproductive tissues. And so we can also think of it that the layer, if we're looking at a certain layer, like in this conversation, we're looking at the bone, we're also thinking about the layers prior to and how that is feeding and supporting this tissue and how that can be a factor. And so that layer before bone being the fat tissue, that is one where it's a situation where fat is also really important, that these healthy fats are really important when we're thinking about bone health. And yeah, I think that's an important call out too.
Yeah, and if you want to go into more depth on digestion, our first 2 or 3 episodes really cover that in detail about the whole digestive process and the Ayurvedic perspective on it, and where these tissues play a role and how they're fed and how it's assimilated. So yeah, I love going into that in depth. So yeah, go back and listen to those first couple episodes, and there's a whole lot to talk about there.
Yeah, definitely. So, and the other piece is stress, and we've alluded to that already. I think that there's a lot of different ways that we can explain how stress impacts our hair. And I think just one way I'll take is thinking about this concept, this Ayurvedic concept of ojas. And so ojas is what we think of as our vital essence. And so when our nutrition is getting delivered to all of these different tissues we described, what's remaining is our ojas. And so we think of our ojas as our reserve, our resiliency. It's connected to our immunity, our energy, our vitality. And so one of the biggest things that can deplete that is stress. When the body is in a chronic, severe stress state for a long period of time, going back to what you said in terms of body intelligence, the body really gets to a point of prioritizing, right? It's prioritizing what are the most essential functions in the body right now. And what we think of this tissue that's beyond the body and this external part, it thinks of it as being non-essential. I think that's like personifying the body more, perhaps, but I think it's a way that I come back to thinking about it often is like the body's always prioritizing. And when we're in this state of high chronic stress, that is a situation where over time, the body is going to not only lose that ojas and lose that juiciness that can support us, but also really the body's just going to prioritize the basic needs.
Yeah, I love the way you described that. I think it's so important to understand it from that perspective because it is this prioritization system that's built into our DNA, which is also fascinating. The body is going to prioritize survival over aesthetics, right? It's like, okay, I don't need to grow hair right now, but I need to run away from this thing that is threatening my life. And so, yeah, that chronic like negative cycle can be very detrimental to these other functions in the body because it's like really getting down to the core of how can I survive, not how can I grow luscious hair.
Yeah.
So it's a really important distinction. And we've seen this in other areas too, right? We've talked about this in our menstrual cycle episodes where if the body is under chronic stress, it's going to prioritize creating cortisol so that we can manage the stress as opposed to creating like progesterone or other sex hormones in the body. So it's going to actually steal those hormones to make stress hormones. So it is all connected in how we're experiencing it. So hair loss is not isolated to this patch of hair on my body that's losing, getting thinner or finer or losing some of it. It is connected to all of these other tissues and systems and functions that the body is responding to. I think of these like hormones and chemicals as our response system to what we're experiencing in our environment or through our foods, whether it's in abundance or if it's lacking. So it's in short, it's our response system that's reprioritizing survival.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think whatever lens we want to take on that, whether we get into the science of specifically how high chronic cortisol levels is impacting the hair follicle itself, or again, we're just like over here personifying the body like I am. Sometimes I almost think of it as the body starts in whispers and then gets into screams. At least speaking back to my story in the beginning, what's going to make you pay attention more than when it's starting to impact that appearance?
If you are enjoying this conversation, it would mean the world to us and help support our work if you'd like, share, leave a review, as well as subscribe to our podcast on whichever platform you use. If you're looking for more connection or would like to support this podcast, we'd love to have you join our Patreon for $5 a month. Here you'll get bonus episodes and access to our community chat Q&A.
And don't forget to check out our wellness library, which is filled with self-guided classes, kitchen tutorials, herbal recipes, and more Ayurvedic practices, all for just $5 a month. Check out the link in the show notes.
This is why when we have clients come to us with hair loss, we're recommending something as simple as breath work, right? Like, because we're getting to the root of the problem. We're not just like applying some Band-Aid solution. It is connecting to these other systems, right? Like regulating our nervous system and regulating our hormones. And that in turn is going to help us feel just what we just described, right? Like this is why some of these really simple practices that we're recommending, it might not be this very obvious from what we've been taught, this very obvious connection. There is a connection, and hopefully this helps clarify some of these recommendations that you might receive through the Ayurvedic perspective, because it is this much broader, holistic view of your health.
Yeah, and I think pranayama, breathwork, is really one of the most powerful, potent practices that we can bring in specifically when we're seeing this disruption in the sex hormones because of what's going on in the stress hormones. I know we've talked about that phenomena often, but it's definitely one that I think can come up in this conversation on hair loss and hair thinning. Because, our hair follicles, they're really sensitive to hormonal shifts. And that's part of when we see women in postpartum will suddenly have this hair loss, right? Because you're kind of falling off a cliff hormonally when you're in that phase. And so we can see those big shifts then. It also explains why we can see these shifts that happen with women in their hair and going into menopause. But this is where I think it gets a little bit more nuanced and sticky is I've sometimes heard it talked about like, oh, it's perimenopause hair loss and kind of brushing that off, so to speak. Whereas I think when you think about it in this context and what you described earlier in terms of the Pitta and Vata components, and we think about transitioning into menopause, in perimenopause, you're at like the peak amount of Pitta in your lifespan. You've been in this Pitta phase of life for all these years. The heat's accumulating, and then you're going into menopause, which is this like rush of Vata. And so, yes, that's the cycle that's happening in your body. But yes, we can also think about what we can bring in to balance that out and balance out those doshas there. So yeah, I think I think we're always dancing here between the science and coming into the hormones and then thinking about it from an elemental standpoint in that regard. But I think this is one example where thinking of it in the elements really makes a lot of sense and why women are experiencing hair loss so frequently in that phase. It's like the peak of your fire that's then transitioning into air. And so going back to that original explanation you had there, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we think about those elements, wind and fire, they move very fast and
Mm-hmm.
quickly and like abruptly and suddenly. And that can all kind of show up very quickly, right? Like all of a sudden, there's these things happening that I've never experienced before. Well, that's part of those elements becoming more present all of a sudden. Whereas something that earth is going to be a little bit slower growing to show up or to present. And so it makes sense because these are more intense, sudden, irregular, mobile elements that move fast and move sudden and move with a lot of intensity. And remembering that as part of the care plan or the wellness plan to address them, we're bringing softness and steadiness to those qualities.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think just acknowledging too, and I feel like I'm speaking directly here to the like perimenopause woman that I think it's tough because we're understanding what's happening in the body hormonally and that we're losing our sex hormones, we're losing that juicy buffer and that we need to bring in things to balance that out. But what's not changing is life and the pace of life and the stress of life and all of those factors. And so just like sharing everything that we're saying and adding that compassion level to it, that I think it's hard when your body's going through that transition but life is not in alignment with that. And I think for so many women it's not, and we're going through this transition at a time when the rest of life isn't slowing down. And so learning how to have these like micro moments of supporting the nervous system, like pranayama that you're saying, it can go a long way and also feel really challenging when you're trying to slow down and have these soothing practices when the rest of the world is going 100 miles an hour around you, right?
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that. And I actually was talking about this recently with another client, and not to go too far down the rabbit hole here, because I think we could talk about this, right? This is a systemic issue in our
Mm.
culture where there's not support for experiences or transitions like this for women specifically. But our conversation, and this is with someone that is 29,
Mm-hmm.
and there's this pressure that they're feeling of, well, I should do this and I should do this and I should do this, of like how they're structuring their day is like a very broad example. But there's also this other side of them that they shared that they're really feeling drawn to slowing down. And it's a new feeling for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important, like, if you feel that, listen to that, because that is something that we have to unlearn as a culture. And I
Mhm.
know, Rita, we have had many conversations about this together, both online and offline, about it, and just how unsupported we are in taking care of ourselves in this way and through this process. And so I do believe that everyone has an intuition that is so strong within them. I think some of us maybe feel that at different points than others based on situations, but when that calls you, it is so important to listen to it, because it is this way of really trusting nature unfolding, right? And not, it's kind of this resistance to the system,
Mm.
right? Where we are taught to, no, don't slow down, just like take this thing and move on.
Mhm.
And I think that that's not a sustainable thing for our community and for our
Yeah.
culture and for this world that we live in, to feel connected to each other. Because when we don't slow down, we become even more disconnected from ourselves. And when our disconnected self is showing up to the community, we're not helping anyone
Mhm.
by doing that.
Mhm.
So, not to go on too much of a tangent here, but I think that when these elements are in excess and we're experiencing these sudden changes and we're experiencing chronic stress, I think it is this much broader invitation to like really look at where's the misalignment in my life.
Mhm.
And maybe that feels really big. And I think this is kind of fresh off of my recent conversation with a client. So it feels important to like share in this relative to this conversation. But I think just starting with these small things, like you're saying, Rita, like I can slow down for pranayam for a minute a day. And it's just something that we're not used to learning or used to trying. And I think it really can have a very profound impact on these other imbalances that we're experiencing. That's my rant for today on that.
No, I think it's a relevant rant though, and I think especially because we're talking about hair loss, we're thinking about the bone, we're thinking about mineral dense foods. We're going to get into what those foods are. We're thinking about balancing pitta and we're balancing vata, and I think so much of that comes down to like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this, and losing sight of this greater systemic level of that, and how often we can really put blame on ourselves instead of questioning some of the systems in place. And I think I appreciate that so many of our conversations do come back to that, because I think it's really important. And I think it's always finding that balance between, okay, what can we do systemically to not create a world where we're all just going 100 miles an hour and having hair loss because of it, but then also in this moment, what are practices that I can bring in that can support my body, that's clearly communicating with me if I'm having this sudden change in my hair? What is my body asking for? And you mentioned strengthening digestion, and I don't want to undersell that, because I think before we get into these mineral dense foods, digestion is key, and that we need to get to a place where the body can break down these foods, because a lot of mineral dense foods, they're dense, they can be harder to break down, not all of them, but some of them. And so I think we could get in situations where you're like looking on Instagram about foods that are good for hair, and you're just like pounding black sesame seeds or something. And all that's such a great food for hair health. It's like we always have to start with digestion. And that stress management piece, I think, are really the foundations there on so many levels. But yeah, I don't know if you have more to say on that, or if you want to maybe get into some of the foods that can really be medicine for the bones and therefore for our hair.
Yeah. No, all of that was really helpful, and I'm glad that you said that. And yeah, and so practically speaking, if we're going for foods and exploring what that looks like, if we're thinking minerals, seaweed and nuts and seeds, like you mentioned, sesame seeds, Brazil nuts have a lot of minerals and nutrients in them, flax, hemp seeds, soaked and peeled almonds. If we think about those, like they're all foods that are from the earth
Mm.
and from the ocean, and that has a lot of mineral richness to them. So I kind of think about it in that way, like it is sprouted from the earth. A lot of like those nuts and seeds that we're talking about, and then the seaweed and other seafoods too have a lot of minerals. They're getting that from the water, from the ocean itself has a lot of minerals in it. And they're absorbing it through what they're eating, right? And then we eat the fish or the seaweed or whatever it is, and we're having the minerals from that. And dates and figs, and we've talked about broths a lot on this podcast, right? Broths have a lot of minerals in them. And depending where they're coming from, like it's kind of this condensed version, whether it's a veggie broth or a meat broth, you can get, explore different options there in terms of broths. So a lot with food, but again, to your point, like all of those that I listed, seeds have hard shells to them. We want to make sure we can digest them and break them down, or not just like go in one side and out the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I've definitely seen before in my own digestion when it's not very strong. So always back to digestion for that reason. And then even talking about herbal infusions, I love my herbal infusions for mineral and vitamin perspective. And I think it is such a great way, especially when it's really hot out and I feel like my digestion is low. Go back and listen to our Pitta summer episode a few episodes back of why our Agni is low in the summer. So I love having mineral infusions, especially in the summer for that reason, because I feel like I'm still getting it in. It's gentle on my digestion, but I'm still hydrating and nourishing myself. And so, yeah, to mention a few like nettles and moringa, if those are appropriate for your constitution, those are very mineral dense. And yeah, any others that come to mind for you? I feel like there's a lot there.
Yeah. Well, I think just to circle back on the nuts and seeds piece and the digestion piece that you mentioned, I think just to add to that, something I see really commonly in my practice is people eating raw seeds and nuts. And I think the majority of us have a hard time digesting that. So it can always depend a little bit on like soak times and all those things that can get a little bit intricate. But I think the majority of us can access the nutrition from those much better if we're either toasting them or sprouting them or cooking them in what we're eating. So I think that's just an important call out again, that people can like go really hard on these foods, but we have to think about that digestibility and whether it needs to be cooked or soaked first. And the other thing that I just wanted to bring a little more attention to, I think, is the bone broth piece, because I do find that in itself can make a big difference. And I will say I'm somebody that I really don't like the taste of bone broth, but I sneak it into my khichdi and my rice. And when I make khichdi, I actually use half of the liquid. I tend to use bone broth, and even like beef bone broth in the winter often. And then the other half I'll use veggie broth. And so I think that's just something to bring up, because I know a lot of people do enjoy it and sip on it, but I just can't stomach it. But it can actually taste really good when we cook with it or like use it in a stir fry or things like that. So yeah, but when we think about the collagen, people always are asking me about collagen powder, and I never really know how to answer that, or like I don't feel like I have researched it enough to have a strong opinion on it. But my answer is always, well, what about bone broth? That's kind of this really bioavailable way to get collagen. You can just cook with it all day long. So yeah, and I think maybe the only other one that I'd think about is Ayurveda would talk about dairy as being supportive for the bones as well. And I think it's tricky in this day and age to get good quality dairy, and dairy is also one of those foods that we have to think about digestibility. And Ayurveda often recommends, when we're talking about cow's milk, of having it cooked, having it spiced. Like there's all these different levels, and I think there's individuality in terms of digestibility with all these things. But yeah, I think those are definitely the main foods that come up. I think the only other thing that comes to mind is sometimes when we're doing these recordings, it gives me ideas for what to add to our wellness library. I have a great recipe for date balls with black sesame seeds that I think of as like a really good bone supporting snack. So I'll add that sometime in this next month for people that are in our wellness library as well, because it's a really tasty recipe that you could just tell you're getting a lot of nutrition from.
Cool. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, one way I get some of my seeds in is I'll blend some up. I'll do different mixes, right? But say black sesame and pumpkin seeds, and I'll blend them and have this little sprinkle on my counter. And then I can add it to as a garnish. And I'm just kind of getting it throughout the week without being like loading it up at every meal. So it does feel easy to digest and it's gentle on the system.
Nice.
I'm integrating the seeds throughout the week without feeling that I need to have this huge meal with all the things in it. It's kind of this like topping throughout the week.
Yeah. Nice. I think that's the way to do it. Is just like be sprinkling these foods in. I do something similar. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Nice.
We'll also, in all of our Ayurveda conversations, we do talk about the things that are worth reducing that can also be contributing to the imbalance. So there's certainly things we can favor and increase, but not overlooking the things that can be contributing to the aggravation of the imbalance. And so in this case, if we're thinking about Pitta and Vata, coffee and alcohol, which we've talked about before. And both of those, they don't only have a heating quality, but they have that depletion quality to them. So they're actually, I almost think of it as they're like taking away from the body. And so, yeah, I think with coffee and alcohol, I mean, maybe go back and listen to our coffee episode. I know we've referenced a lot of episodes on this one, which is pretty cool. But yeah, again, looking at those qualities and how they can contribute to stress. We've talked about stress and how they contribute to excess heat and excess dryness. And yeah, I think those are like big ones that can be very overlooked, especially coffee is a habitual indulgence that we can have. So yeah, curious if you have anything to add on that, but those are certainly two really big ones.
Yeah, the other thing that I think we want to be really mindful of when we're experiencing hair thinning, hair loss is hot showers. Like if we're thinking about how you described earlier, that pitta that's rising up to the head, and then if we're taking really hot showers, that in general cannot be great for pitta, but specifically having that on the scalp can be not supportive if we're already having that excess heat going on at our scalp. And I'll just say that I say that as somebody who really loves hot showers. That is the pitta aggravating thing that I choose to do. But I will turn the temperature down when I'm washing my hair. And so I'm like taking the hot shower in my body, but then I'm using cooler water in my head. That's my compromise. Because in general, we are cautious in Ayurveda of adding heat to the head in many cases. And I think it's especially true when we're experiencing excess pitta, or again, we're like in this phase of life where there's a lot of pitta, a lot of heat going on in the body. Yeah.
Yeah, and even in traditional Ayurvedic practice, when you go for a steam, you can look it up online, but there you'll find pictures of a steam box, so a sauna box. There's like a hole for your head, so your head is not getting heat. So Ayurveda really encourages if you're going to use heat as a medicinal therapy, you're still not putting heat on the head area because heat rises, right? So you think about this whole like funnel of your body, it's just like funneling heat right to the head area. So we want to really use that with a lot of conservativeness, I think, and like caution, because heat can really accumulate and stay kind of stuck in the head area. And we talk about that relative to not just the hair, but also the eyes. The eyes can accumulate that heat. And so it's a really important piece of being mindful, to your point, Rita, of how you're using those hot things and where on your body you're using them, because it is such a big contributing factor.
Yeah. Yeah, and there might be situations like Vata situations where some warmed up oil on the head can be really medicinal. But yeah, I'm glad that you explained that, and people should look it up because I do think it's really cool how Ayurvedic bodywork works in that way. And speaking of bodywork, maybe circling back to, we've had all this rich conversation on the internal aspects of supporting our hair fall through supporting our bones, supporting our nervous system, supporting our Pitta Vata, but there are things that we can do topically. So scalp massage is something that can be really supportive. It can support circulation and blood flow to the head, to the scalp. So when there is more of like a Vata issue or the circulation is not happening there, that can be really supportive. The scalp massage I tend to teach clients that we do have in our wellness library also hits on marma points. And you can think of marma points as these junctures of where energy channels in our body intersect. correct. And so there are certain marma points in the body that are associated to certain areas of functioning. And so when we're doing that scalp massage, we're hitting those marma points that also can be really supportive as a nervous system aid. It can support sleep and anxiety and all of those factors as well. And so part of it is that benefit from the massage itself. And then the other piece is what we're massaging with. And there's lots of different oils that could be used. I'm a really big fan of Bhringraj oil. Bhringraj is an herb that's often thought of, I think the translation is king of the hair, something along those lines. Yeah. It's really connected to supporting hair growth. So Bhringraj oil, it's cooling, it's promoting that regrowth. And I think whether or not you're warming that up, there might be some situations, and depending on your constitution and your situation, of whether you're bringing that to be a little bit warm, or for me, when I do it, I don't warm it up and I do just cool because there's enough heat in me. And the other one I'll just add that I really love to do in the summertime, I'm actually getting ready to harvest some of this beautiful aloe behind me, is I will do an aloe and coconut oil hair mask and massage with that. And I'll harvest some fresh aloe gel and mix it in with some coconut oil and massage that in the head, leave that on for a couple hours, and then shower and rinse that off. And that I find can be really soothing to the scalp and soothing to the hair follicles and really pitta balancing. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's really fascinating what we can apply topically to the hair to support it. And again, looking at the elements, like balancing that heat and that wind by soothing and cooling and creating stability. The other one that I found helpful is needle tapping. And I've used it on my eyebrows a little bit just to see if they would get thicker. And I have seen that happen. I do have kind of a small side. I think it's just my natural hairline, but I was curious. I tried the needle tapping there, and it did start growing, small little hairs started growing. And I think basically the needle tapping, it's this very fine, it's called a hammer, but it's very dainty. And there's these little needles at the end, or blunted needles. So they're not super sharp, but they have a little prick to them. And you gently tap them. And what that does is stimulate the follicle. So it can help to encourage regrowth or growth of hair if that follicle has been damaged or it's been kind of dormant, right? It's not really active. That can help stimulate it. And I have used it on my husband's head because he has a bald spot in the back of his head and it has regrown there. Not fully where he has a full head of hair, but there are small hairs regrowing and growing back. So, and I've talked to clients about this that have lost hair because of stress at different spots on their head. And then also clients going through chemotherapy and helping to re-strengthen the hair as it's starting to grow back. So that can be a helpful application for it too. But even we didn't really talk about this today, but even a sign of PCOS can be the eyebrows thinning. And I found the needle tapping can be a helpful way to encourage that regrowth as an external application.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think, again, it's we're always thinking locally and internally. And I think when we're doing both is when we can see the best results for sure.
Yeah.
And you turned me on to needle tapping. I think I had seen on social media on Instagram that you were using that. And I was like, oh, that's curious. And yeah, I bought one. And again, it wasn't for a specific reason. I was just curious about it. But I do enjoy the process of doing it. It's one of those simple 3-minute evening routine pieces where it can be oh, it's a nice way that I'm just doing a nice little wind down routine. But yeah, I've heard some stories from other practitioners that have found it to be really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can link it in the show notes. I have an affiliate code that you can use if you go onto my website, but I'll add it to the show notes as well. And you can check out the Facial Cupping Expert is where I buy that from. And then also she has other products that I love that we won't get into today, but I think Rita, you also said use her facial cups that are really great for your skincare. So check that out. I'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing that I'd like to circle back to is the nervous system piece, because I think we had some deeper conversation about it, but I sometimes worry about talking about stress and having it be this thing that's oh, it's stress that's causing it. And then we just get stressed about our stress, right? And so that's a reason and a situation that I love to bring in herbs and find that herbs can be such an ally in supporting our nervous system because stress is a part of life. And sometimes people might listen to this episode and think like, well, stress is just where I'm at right now. But I do think that there are so many nervine types of herbs that we can bring in that can give the body that support, even as we're working to change the behavioral lifestyle aspects of it with things like pranayama and morning routines and evening routines and micro touchdown moments of diaphragmatic breathing and all of those things that we can do. I think herbs can be such a beautiful addition to that. And, we could think about, we talked about Bhringraj, like certain herbs that are supportive for hair growth, but I do think that oftentimes when we're thinking about herbs specific for hair growth, we are thinking about the nervous system in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. And yeah, like picking one, like starting with one, if that's what you're capable of right now, it's always an excellent place to start, and not like, I'm going to go do all of these things that they just recommended. Pick one that feels attainable for you at this phase of life and begin there and see how it feels. And I mean, I think Rita and I both have done that at various phases of our life for different reasons. And sometimes that's the reality of different situations. So
yeah,
this information is here for when it feels possible for people. And to your point, not stressing about the stress and being able to apply what you can when you can is the best place to begin.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you feel like you need support, we're here, right?
Yeah.
And I think that can be a powerful thing, is working with a clinician when you are having something distressing like hair loss and you're trying to find all the information. I think it can be really powerful to sit with someone and be like, okay, this is my life. Like, give me the plan that can actually work with my life, because I think sometimes, like figuring it out is just adding more stress, and it can be a wonderful thing to connect with someone that can guide you through that too.
Yeah, for sure. We're here for you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that about covers it for hair loss and hair thinning and all the in-betweens and things to consider. So yeah, is there anything else that you would like to add, Rita?
I don't think so. That feels complete. And by complete, I mean it had some really lovely tangents in there that I appreciated, and also some hopefully clear information on specifics to hair loss. So
yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
great.
Cool. Well, thanks, Rita.
Yeah, thanks, Brittni.
If you enjoyed today's episode, it would mean the world to us and help support our work if you'd like, share, leave a review, as well as subscribe to our podcast on whichever platform you use. If you're looking for more connection or would like to support this podcast, we'd love to have you join our Patreon for $5 a month. Here you'll get bonus episodes and access to our community chat Q&A.
And don't forget to check out our wellness library, which is filled with self-guided classes, kitchen tutorials, herbal recipes, and more Ayurvedic practices, all for just $5 a month. Thanks so much for being here with us. Until next time, be well.